Well, welcome Melanie C, Melanie Chisholm, sporty spice, trailblazer, icon, now author of Who I Am. For everyone listening on Times Radio, we are bringing you this special edition of The Ladder, our weekly feature hearing from inspirational women live from the Cheltenham Literature Festival. Welcome to the audience here who has battled through a rail strike and rain to join us today. Now, anyone here can submit questions on the iPad via Slido, and I'll get to as many of them as I can at the end. So, Melanie, having read your book, I feel like I kind of know you, which is great. I'm assuming that's what you wanted, given that it's called Who I Am. Mm-hmm. People listening might not, so let's just start at the beginning, your childhood.
Yeah.
Tell us about where you were born.
Little old me. Well, I grew up in the northwest of England. I was born in Wiston Hospital, which is Merseyside, and I spent the first few years of my life there, and then I moved to a place called Runcorn with my mum. My mum and dad separated and divorced when I was very young, about 3 years old, and we eventually settled in a place called Widnes when I was 8 years old, and that's where we stayed, and I went to school and really began to become the person I am today.
And when you say, you settled there, you went to school, that sounds like a sort of picture of stability, but it was quite a sort of chaotic childhood in some ways, wasn't it, would you say?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing for all of us, our childhood is our normal, isn't it? And it's not until you get beyond that and you start to examine it a bit more closely and go, actually, it was quite different to my friends. I was the only person in my friendship group whose parents were divorced, which I think is very different now. I think, sadly, it would probably be the other way around. It's probably more rare to have your parents together and the family unit together. But at that time, sometimes that made me feel a little bit different. And then I think because both my mum and dad remarried and went on to have families with their new partners, that I'm an only child of my mum and dad, so that kind of made me feel a little bit uncertain about my place in the world. And I think I put a lot of my determination to succeed down to those things that happened to me in my early years.
Well, that's really interesting. Tell us, flesh that out a little bit more. Why did that give you a determination to succeed? What did you want out of life? When do you remember thinking, I know what I want to be? What I really want to be.
Yeah, what I really, really want to be. So I discovered dance. That was probably the first style of performing that I found. I mean, the funny thing is my mum is actually a singer and has always sang. She started in bands when she was 14. So I was quite used to going to places to watch her perform, and there was always musicians around in the house rehearsing. But I had a love of dance. And I loved being on stage, and it gave me so much joy. And I'm quite, like a lot of performers, I'm actually quite a shy person, but then I have so much more confidence when I'm up on stage. So being in that environment around other like-minded people is where I felt free and at home. And, it's a childish thought, but when I was growing up, with my mum and dad not staying together, I felt like a failure. I kind of felt like it was my fault in a way, which of course, as an adult, you begin to understand relationships and, adult relationships. But that's what I was growing up with. And then I think especially because these new families were forming and I was in the middle and always, felt like a little bit of a burden. It was like, who's going to have her at this time? And, so it just made me think, right, I have to establish who I am in this world. And it sounds slightly melodramatic, but I have to be worthy of this existence. And to me, the connection you have with people when you're on stage and the love and the adoration you can get from being a performer felt like the way I wanted to go.
There's so much to unpick on that, but let me just pick up on one thing. You were talking about gymnastics and dance making you feel free. But in the book, you also talk about the perfectionism there, which is very strong in you, and that's both, there's upsides and downsides to that, aren't there?
Absolutely. I think so many people suffer with this failed perfectionism because we never get there. Thank goodness we never get there because there's no such thing as perfect, right? But I think as a performer, as an athlete, as a sports person, that determination to succeed is very important to help you get to that place. And I think if it becomes out of balance, then that's when the problems can occur.
We'll come back to that. I know we will. And you talk about that a lot in the book, which is very honest, and that's great because, as I say, I felt like I knew you having read it. And the honesty there is really important. But you describe yourself many times in the book as shy. Very hard to believe, looking at you here and seeing you with the Spice Girls and so on. Was dancing a way of sort of coming out of your shell?
Yeah, it was even the environment, just being with people who loved what I loved. There was something about it that made me feel like I was being my true self in that place.
And there's a moment in the book when you pinpoint when you wanted to be a singer. You've talked about your mum being a singer. So tell us about that moment. Take us back there.
Well, I always loved singing. I got a lot of joy from it. But I knew how hard it was to work in the music industry. My mum had got so close to success, and she's successful in her own right, but never really to the height she would have liked. So I realised that was tough. And I never really had a lot of confidence in my own voice, and I felt dancing was the way forward. And I was lucky enough to be accepted into an incredible performing arts college when I was 16. So I left home at 16, which I can't believe now. When I look at my 13-year-old daughter, it's like, whoa, it's so young. But I was pursuing this dream, and I was down in Kent, and we had competitions each year, and I sang in this little, college competition. And I was singing a song called Chief Cook and Bottle Washer. I think it's from a musical called The Rink. It was sung by Liza Minnelli originally. And there's this moment in the song where it really builds like into this kickline moment. And for the very first time with an audience, because dancing is very different to singing, dancing to me always felt like quite a selfish art, because you're expressing yourself, but you really are feeling all of this yourself. I didn't ever feel a huge connection with the audience. But then when you're singing and you're looking out and this energy is a transaction, I felt the audience kind of lift. And that just, at that moment, I thought, this is it. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to pursue.
Yeah. Do you think your mum ever feels almost like just a tiny little bit of envy that you've... It's a hard question, but...
Oh, I don't know.
Never asked her.
Well, no. I should ask her over Christmas dinner. That would go down well.
That would go well this year, wouldn't it?
I think the thing is, being a mum myself, I can only kind of see it from my own perspective. And I just don't think I could be jealous of my own child. Do you know what I mean? I just feel like I kind of would want Scarlett, whatever she did, to even improve on anything I'd achieved. Do you know what I mean? I think you just want the best for your children, don't you? My mum's just been so supportive, and I think what's been so wonderful for mine and my mum's relationship is that we understand what motivates us. She has a passion for music and singing and performing, and it was something we really bonded on over the pandemic, because I know lots of performers felt the same way. We didn't have this outlet to connect with people, and I was like, who am I? I really was questioning my identity because I'd lost this part of me. And I spoke to my mum about that, and she sings less now, and she wouldn't mind me saying she's 73 and she's incredible and still sings when she gets opportunities. But, as you get older, things become less. And she's like, I'm the same. I just have to sing. It's just this way of being able to express yourself and feel whole.
Did she give you any tips on singing?
Oh, yes, she did. The one I always remember is when you've got a high note, squeeze your bum together. I'm not sure
I'm going to try that next
the best
time.
Kind of technique, but it makes you smile, and that makes you sing in tunes.
I'm
though,
sure
that's so good.
It's all about the diaphragm, right? It's all connected. Well, that's great, because we're going to come right at the end to advice to other women, other girls, other people. So obviously squeezing your bum together ranks high on that.
I think there's a few times in life when that's useful.
So you talked about the effect that your parents' divorce had on you, and how you considered yourself a burden, and that comes up a lot in the book, that you were very hard on yourself. Why did you consider yourself a burden?
It's hard to know. It's really hard to know. I think those early experiences as a child, and, the memory of, my mum, she started all over again. It was the late 70s, and her, making the decision to end the relationship with my dad, the families were not happy about it. It was a different time, and now, as an adult, I have so much respect for her. It was very courageous. And in making this decision, she started all over again. And, I'm from a working class area, and nobody was comfortable. Everybody worked extremely hard just to make ends meet. So, the joint funds that she had with my dad and the house that they bought together, she left all of that behind. So, she went on and she was working a lot. She was having to work in the week, and she would often work in offices and do different things. But then she was performing all weekend. And then sometimes her work performing would take her away for longer periods of time, which is something I have with my daughter now. But of course, financially, things were very different for her. So it would always be like, well, what are we going to do with Melanie? So there's just this thing of like, it's like, oh, what are we going to do with you? It makes you feel like a burden. It's like, oh, well, everyone's life would be easier. That's such a childhood thing, isn't it? Well, it'd be so much easier if I wasn't here. I didn't ask to be born. Yeah. But, in reality, when people are scrabbling around to find childcare, you feel like, oh, I'm a problem, you know?
And we talk about ascending the ladder now. So what were you doing when you saw the Fateful advert in the Stage magazine? Take us back to that very moment.
I love this story. I love this story because, in your life, we have these little snapshots of memories, don't we? And sometimes you've got a real visual, and I can just remember it clear as day. And I'd left college, I'd been there for 3 years, I'd finished my course, I was rehearsing, I was auditioning, and, I was getting some callbacks and things were going okay, but not as well as I would have hoped. I was starting to get a bit frustrated. And one particular day, I had friends auditioning for a cruise, to be a dancer on a cruise ship. And that was something I never wanted to do because my goal was to work in the West End, and I thought, well, if you're taken away, you miss opportunities. But it got to this point, it was tough, there was no money about, needed to get a job. So I went to this cruise audition. And while I was there in the cafeteria, I was handed a flyer. And this flyer was for a girl band. It was an audition. And I turned to my friend and said, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. And it became the Spice Girls. After many twists and turns, it became the Spice Girls. But that was the defining sliding doors moment.
Yeah, well, one of the twists and turns was that you actually fell ill and missed your chance to do the audition, didn't you? So, but a stroke of luck, they called you back. And I just wondered what role you think luck has in success generally.
Oh, gosh. I mean, it's always so hard to say, isn't it? I had so much self-belief as a young person. And the thing, we'll talk about advice later on, but when you are able to trust that gut instinct, it's very, very powerful. And I did know that day when I didn't think about the words that fell out of my mouth. When I said to my friend, that's it, that's what I'm going to do, I meant it.
Yeah.
And I went along to the audition, but fell ill for the recall and begged my mum to ask them to give me another chance. I had tonsillitis, so I couldn't even speak. And they were like, we're sorry, we have the 5 now. And I thought, well, you know what? Part of being a performer is learning to deal with disappointment. It happens a lot. So it's like, okay, I thought this was the one, but maybe not. Picked myself up again and carried on. And then a couple of weeks later, the call came and they said, look, somebody hasn't worked out, we'd like to see you again. And from that moment on, I was in this band. And yeah, I think when I met the girls...
Yeah, tell us what you made of all of them. First impressions.
Well, it's so brilliant. So I had a little Zoom meeting today with some of the girls. And because I've been talking a lot about this and the book and everything, and I was looking at Jerry and I was looking at Melanie on those little boxes we've all got so used to. And
Victoria wasn't there, right?
Victoria wasn't there today. Not today.
It's coming, though. The reunion's coming.
You never know. And I just looked at them and thought, you really are exactly the way I first took you in, you know? And I kind of love that because we've had such a journey, obviously the incredible Spice Girls journey that everybody knows, but just through our lives and friendships and fallouts and makeups and everything, so much has gone on, but we really truly are the same 5 girls from when we first met.
First impressions of each of them.
Okay, so Mel B, I just thought was the coolest person I'd ever met in my life. She had that incredible hair, she had a Kangol hat on. She was in this like bomber jacket, all northern, Yorkshire lass, and I thought, great, another northerner. And Jerry had on this like fluffy pink jumper, like mohair or something, and she used to wear like 40s, 50s bras, you know, the pointy ones, and she had her hair in little bunches, and she was like yapping like a dog. I don't know why, but I just thought, she's kooky. But I'm really intrigued. And there's something, and Victoria's always been like very, because Emma wasn't here at that point. There was another girl. And Victoria's always, you know, just sitting, keeping her cool with the odd droll quip that comes out of her mouth, always looking a little bit more put together than the rest of us. And nothing's changed.
And I'm going to come back to the reunion later on. But obviously, it's interesting how long you were sort of bumping along and, you know, struggling. You weren't, I sort of imagined that you'd instantly be, you know, flown around the world on first class jets. And it wasn't quite like that initially, which I love in your book. You're hearing about all of that. But I want to hear the most exciting moment where you thought, we've made it, we've done it, this is it.
Ooh, there's a few. There's kind of these stages. So we had our original management, and we didn't really like the direction they were trying to pull us in. So we're so naughty, the Spice Girls. We convinced them to pay for a showcase for us to meet some industry people, some writers, some producers, some publishers. And we knew all along that we were going to hop it because we were just frustrated with them. You know, they thought we should dress the same or similarly, and maybe there should be a lead singer, and we were singing songs written by other people, and they were really rubbish. And we were like, nah, this isn't working out for us, but we have no experience, we have no contacts, so let's do a little bit of groundwork. We did this showcase, and I had my second moment of an audience reaction, and it was like, we really, truly do have something special, which once Emma came into the band, because there was a 5th girl that didn't work out, we were introduced to Emma, and from that day on, something clicked, and this like really intense energy between us, this dynamic which we still have. And we knew from that point we had something very precious. So we left the management, and we're running around, writing songs, meeting all these incredible people, and then we signed with Simon Fuller. We had all these big ideas. We wanted to be the biggest band in the world. We wanted to make a movie, and you know, who did we think we were, right? And I think we released Wannabe. So we'd been together. 94, we got together. Wannabe was released in the July of 1996. So 2 years later, we released our first single. Midweek's number 6. It goes in at number 3, and then we fly off to Japan, because in those days, before the internet, you could, you know, release things separately in different territories and take your time to go around and promote things. So we're over in Japan for 2 weeks, and in that time, Wannabe goes to number 1. And it stays at number 1. So when we fly back to the UK, we've been number 1 for 2 weeks. And that was it. That was when everything changed.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's kind of hard to remember life before it now because it's kind of remained that way.
Well, and I love the description that you have of that moment in the book where it's really frenetic. I mean, you're all over the place, aren't you? Really exciting, exhausting too, though, isn't it?
Yes. This is the thing, you know, it's so hard in that environment because you don't want to complain, because what you're doing is your childhood fantasy. You are living this dream, the thing you've imagined. You've sat in your childhood bedroom with your hairbrush and, you know, learned all the dances of all of the pop stars that you love, and you're up there doing it, but it's grueling and it's exhausting, and the schedule, and I know, you know, this still happens now, and we see lots of young artists suffering because of this, but it's relentless, and it's something that's unsustainable. So at one point, something has to give.
Well, I'll come back to the toll all of that took. I keep on saying I'll come back. I will do, because we've got lots of time to talk, so that's great. But I mean, really, I know everyone in this room will know 2 consecutive #1 albums, 8 #1 singles from 9 worldwide hits, the biggest selling debut single of all time, the biggest selling album in music history by a girl group. Incredible achievement the Spice Girls made. The irony is that you were all about girl power, and yet you weren't in control a lot of the time. I mean, you've described that where you stood up to people just now, but you had to constantly do that, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, we have to be grateful in a sense, because that's what helped us create the band that we became and the impact we were able to have. Because when we first started approaching record companies and management companies and, even looking further ahead to like magazines, they just told us that girl bands don't sell. They're like, okay, not in this genre. It's like young girls, teenage girls, they want to buy records by boys. They're not interested in having posters of girls on their wall. And we were like, what? But it was great, because we were like, we want to change this. We are doing this for the girls. So that's really when we started thinking and talking about girl power.
Yeah.
And that was our motivation. Yeah.
And it was really groundbreaking, that. I mean, what was it in your head that made you really believe, or collectively, that you could blaze a trail and break new ground, really?
Yeah. I think because the 5 of us had such a shared vision, we were all single-minded, we were going to succeed, we were going to make this happen. And I think we're all, as you all know, we're very individual, we're very different people. But the thing that we share is our determination. And when somebody tells a Spice Girl not to do something, then they will go and do it. And I feel so grateful I met the other girls, because as an individual, I'm very determined, but I'm quite shy. So I'm not always as courageous as other members of the band may be. So it was really nice to have this collective where we supported each other and kind of egged each other on. So we really, together, we did things I'd never dream of doing on my own.
Yeah. At the height of your success, 1998, Jerry left the band. And I wondered, when a band implodes, is that like a sort of bereavement almost?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's really difficult, because when Jerry left, we were mid-tour. We had 2 shows left in Europe and then a 3-month tour of the US to complete. And, we knew at the end of this tour we needed a break. We were all so burnt out. But her going at that point, it felt like the beginning of the end, which was never, in my mind, the way it was going to go.
And it certainly wasn't the beginning of the end. But I want to just address what you've talked about, you've alluded to a number of times, the toll everything took on you. And, you had a struggle with an eating disorder and depression. And I wondered whether you realised that something had gone wrong that you really needed to address.
I think with my eating disorder, the initial problems I had, I started restricting my food and I started exercising, and, things just progressed to a point. It started off as being healthy, but it got to a very unhealthy place. And that was probably through my time with the Spice Girls, through the 90s. And, for a number of reasons, a few comments that were made about my appearance, and then being photographed constantly, being commented on constantly.
The media had a lot of...
The tabloid media, yeah, absolutely. And, I would go as far as to say the abuse that we got from the tabloids, which, people ask me if I think it's changed. I think it's changing. I don't think it's changed enough. The language that is still used around women, I think, is disgusting. There's a lot more reading between the lines now, but it's still there. It's still blatant. But back in the day, in the 90s, I looked over, talk about in the book, looking over articles through the 90s and noughties, and I was shocked at the things that they used to say, the things that was acceptable to be said at those times, even the things that was acceptable to be asked on talk shows or asked to do. And we were the Spice Girls. We told people where to go, but we were still victims of this. What was the question? I went on a tangent.
Oh, God, I can't remember, but how? I know.
You mentioned the media and I went,
Actually, while we're on the media, I'll come back to my question in a second, but which I have now remembered, but the answer was great anyway. But while we're on the media, I mean, now obviously you've got all the social media, which you didn't have at the time. Yeah. I mean, is it 10 times worse for women in the public eye now than it was then? And what do you do about that?
Do you know what? It swings and roundabouts, isn't it? Because the thing with social media, I'm really grateful it wasn't around in the 90s. I think I would have found it very difficult to cope with that, along with everything else. But the one benefit from social media is you have an immediate voice. You know, the thing that was often frustrating for me and for all of us when we were written about, if something was untrue or something was unkind, the only opportunity you had to talk back was in an interview. And then, you know, it would have to be a live television or radio interview because, you know, things are often edited in certain ways.
Well, this is unedited, going out live on Times Radio, so there's no chance. But I wonder whether, you know, we've had a lot of talk about social media in the last couple of weeks because of the inquest verdict about Molly Russell. And social media giants held partly responsible for her death. What do you think needs to change in terms of the way social media giants operate?
I think they have a huge responsibility. I'm the mum of a 13-year-old girl. You know, the things that she is exposed to, I mean, I probably don't know half of the things that she's seen. And she's very streetwise, she's very savvy, but she is a child. And that there are, I want to say, virtually, literally no restrictions. You know, when there's things they don't want people to be posting about, they're quite quick to take those down, aren't they? But there's, you know, for young girls, and I have obviously lots of friends with young girls in that age group as well, and it's petrifying, the things that they're seeing and learning about. And then, you know, the issues that are coming out of that. I think...
You let her do social media, but not... You sort of try and keep an eye on what she's looking at.
I value my life. I have to let her use social media. You know, I think I'm sure there's lots of parents in here tonight. It's impossible.
Yeah.
You know, you can try and restrict it as much as you can, but it's a whole new world that they inhabit.
And it's their world. It's their world.
It's their world, you know, and we can't pretend that we understand the world that they live in. So we have to embrace it and monitor it as much as we can, but we could really do with help from the higher powers that have a bit more control.
Well, the question that I asked, and I always make sure that politicians answer the question, so I'm going to make sure you answer the question, but no, you kind of had anyway. I mean, it was about when you realised that something had gone wrong, and I want to add to that how you climbed out of that very dark time in your life.
Okay, so that's when I went off on my tangent. So, yes, it was a very gradual thing for me, and there was a few events that happened, so I was, you know, food, exercise, and then also controlling my behaviour. You know, I realised I was part of something incredibly precious that meant so much to me, and the thought of losing that was petrifying. So I modified everything about myself. And as time progressed and the pressure became more, and the success became more, and the stakes got higher, you know, this just snowballed. And then we were out on the road on tour. And occasionally I get a little voice in my head going, this isn't right. You can't live like this. You can't continue to live like this. But then a bigger voice would go, you haven't got any choice. This is what you have to do. This is the way it has to be. And so I battled with this through my time, but you're so busy and you're having an incredible time at the same time. This isn't a book of doom and gloom. I like to think it's very balanced, but life is, you know, ups and downs, isn't it? And then I went to LA. When we came off tour, I started my first solo record. And that was the first time I tried to address my eating disorder, and I said the words out loud for the first time. I had one session, but that was it. I wasn't quite ready. So I kind of put all these people in place to try and take care of me, to take the responsibility away from myself. And then at the millennium, I started to feel very low, very lethargic. I was struggling to get out of bed. I had no motivation. At this point, I'd started binge eating, which really frightened me because from having all of this control, losing all control, you know, and sometimes I document in the book, like finding myself mid-binge And it's just like, what is going on? And I came home in the January of 2000, and I didn't even want to leave the house. I was struggling to get out of bed, and things were getting worse. And I just thought, I can't do it on my own anymore. And that's when I finally found the courage to go to my GP. And that's when I was diagnosed with depression.
And was there anyone who sort of helped you come to that conclusion? Was there anyone at that point who you would look back and say was crucial in helping you get on the road to recovery?
I feel, I'm very close to my family. I have incredible friends, but I really isolated myself. I was so ashamed, and it was my big secret. But the issues I was dealing with are things that alter your appearance, so I was very underweight for a very long time. And then I started to gain weight quite quickly. And, so people can see something's going on, something's not right. I was very withdrawn. And I just don't think people knew how to deal with it and how to cope and how to help. And I just feel like now, I didn't even know, I knew what depression was, but I never thought, oh, I'm depressed. That's what's wrong with me. And I just feel so grateful that now we talk about it so much more openly. We have the words, don't we, to express how we're feeling and what we might be going through.
Yeah. And you talked about when Jerry left the band that you thought that was the beginning of the end, but actually your career is a great lesson in reinvention because you've had this very successful career as a solo artist. And the music industry has seen massive change, still undergoing massive change because of the transition to streaming. Do you have to force yourself to embrace change, or does it come naturally?
I think coming from a band like the Spice Girls, because we were so lucky, because if you think about it, the 90s, people sold records. I mean, you gave out some of the stats earlier. It was a real, it was an incredible time, a golden age, absolutely, yeah, for the record industry. And to be part of that, it's hard to let go. But you have to. And that's what I've found, in areas of my career when I've not embraced change, it is when things haven't gone well. And, things continue to evolve, like you say. So it's, always looking forward and trying to understand, what's next.
What is next?
What is next? I don't know.
The Spice Girls reunion. Yeah, have you persuaded Victoria yet?
Nice. This is work in progress.
She wasn't on the Zoom call.
She wasn't on the Zoom today. Today, she was on.
Have you rescheduled?
Today. So you're very good, aren't you? Anyway, so about the reunion. Well, we are celebrating anniversaries at the moment. Last year was 25 years since Wannabe and Spice, the first album. This year is Spice World, the movie and album. So there are lots of little celebrations around that, but we are looking at planning something bigger.
Message to Victoria on the reunion.
A message to her.
Yeah, because she might be listening to Times Radio.
She knows she wants to do it. The thing is, what I always say, I think especially now, all of us girls, we really respect each other more than ever. We've been through so much, and there was times, I think we love each other and drive each other crazy in equal amounts, and that's kind of the beauty of the thing. But as you get older, and we're all parents and we have our careers, and we're very appreciative of what we gave each other. So now, of course, the invitation for Victoria to join us back on stage is always there. And even if she's not on stage with us, she's always very involved. Like even creatively with the 2019 stadium shows, we wanted her approval on everything. We wanted her to know how it was going to look. And that's very important to us. But moving forward...
So she doesn't need to sing. She could just come on in one of her amazing outfits.
You're not going to let this go, are you?
All right, I am going to let it go because I need to get your advice on everything. And also, I want to ask you, before we move on to advice, the Spice Girls for me, it's all bound up with Cool Britannia, and, Jerry asked Tony Blair to appear on your first video, and he said no, weirdly. But what do you make of Liz Truss's first month in office as Prime Minister?
Whoa, I didn't sign up for that question. I kind of avoid political issues. But yeah, I didn't have my photograph taken with Liz at a certain event I was at recently, and I'll leave it at that.
Where was that? Did she want her photo? She wanted her photo taken?
Oh, no. She just happened to be an event that I was at and somebody else was there, and some people will know what I'm talking about.
But is she girl power? I mean, she's, a female Prime Minister.
In essence, but I don't want that to sound like it's, that is my beliefs. It's a very difficult time, as we all know, in the UK right now. And I come from an area of the UK where lots of people struggle financially. I'm not going to go down the political
let me ask you a slightly broader question on that
Yes.
point, because it is a difficult time. And, you've got bonuses for the bonus cap for bankers being raised at the same time as you've got nurses not getting a below inflation pay rise, for example. You've got benefits not being uprated in line with inflation. What would be your message on thinking of the people who are the worst off?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, you're really not going to let it go. I try not to be political, but in all honesty, I can't swear, it's a flipping disgrace. Isn't it, though? I mean,
what in particular is a disgrace?
Well, you talk about bankers getting their bonuses. I'm in a very privileged position. I can't get up on my high horse and start saying things, but I think any person with any morals can see what's going on isn't right. But I think we all feel like just so worn out by it all, And it concerns me. What's going to happen? People are desperate. What is going to happen?
So there's got to be fairer policies put in place when it comes to...
Absolutely. Always. I mean, again, I'm not a politician. I don't want to be quoted on... And also, I'm not informed enough to make these statements. But all I will say is, obviously, my friends and family, the environment that I'm from, I don't think the majority of this country is looked after in the way it should be.
Do you know what? Judging by the reaction to your answer there, your next move should be heading up to number 10.
A Spice Girl in power would be good, right?
Let's move on to advice, because we talked about the advice that your mum gave, squeezing your bum cheeks together. I thought that was absolutely excellent.
Kill me for that. She's like, I've given you better advice than that, haven't I?
Well, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever received? And what's your best advice for a successful and yet happy life?
Okay, so the best advice from my mum was never do anything you don't feel comfortable doing, which sounds simple. But I think if you work in entertainment, that's really good advice. And I just think generally in life, there's other elements in the book where I haven't trusted my instincts. I've done things, or I've allowed things to happen where I've been very uncomfortable and I've known it's not right, but I've been afraid to speak up.
So trust your instincts. Speak up.
Speak up. And I think, obviously I can only speak from a woman's perspective, but I think so many of us, as children, we are so full of life and the essence of who we are. We go through these experiences and teen years and 20s, and we get so much knocked out of us and we start to mistrust ourselves. I spent so long thinking everybody knows better than me. And it's just BS. I wish I could swear. It really, really is. I have learnt that if you can find, the strength to truly trust your own instincts, you are the person who knows what's best for you better than anybody else. And that is what I try to live by these days.
Great advice. So, and you talk a lot in the book about female friendship, and that's obviously that friendship with the other Spice Girls has obviously been really sustaining. How do you think female and male friendships differ, and how important for a woman to succeed is it that she has friendships and networks and support in that way?
Yeah, it's interesting because I grew up with lots of boys. I've got lots of brothers. And I work with lots of male musicians. And, the music industry, things are changing, but it's still pretty male-dominated in certain areas. And I feel comfortable with men, with women, and I've been lucky enough to work with some incredible people that have educated me about the LGBTQI plus community, so some non-binary people, and I feel my girlfriends are so important, that kind of backbone. The thing I always remember at school, it's funny, it's on my mind because one of my school friends is here tonight.
Where are you?
She's so excited.
There we are. Come on up.
So we grew up dancing together and just doing all things creative and loving the Doors and the Lambada. And we always had this thing, wasn't it, like with boys. Boys come and go, but your friends stay. And I think that was the kind of ethos with the Spice Girls as well. And, obviously, all the Spice Girls now, or most of the Spice Girls, are in very happy long-term relationships. But we've all had our ups and downs, and it's always the females that have remained. But yeah, we've stood by each other. I think the interesting thing with women and the media and our culture in general is that they try to pit us against each other. The Spice Girls are at war, or All Saints and the Spice Girls are at war. And it's like we were all always friends. There was fallouts within each other's bands, but predominantly we were friends with each other. And it's like, I do wonder if the patriarchy are just so petrified of the strength of women when they're together, is why they try to make this thing that we can't get on.
That's fascinating, and you really did. That girl power thing, it really resonated with me. I mean, I was born in the same year as you. Our daughters actually share the same name, so I feel a bond with you. I felt a bond reading your book, and I feel even more of a bond now. We've got just a few minutes more on the radio to go, and then, of course, the audience here will get a chance to ask all the questions. But I wondered if you've talked about success, and you've talked about the toll that your success took on your mental health. Has your definition of success changed over the years? Oh,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's, how do we quantify it? I think it was Bob Marley, he had a great answer for that question, didn't he? But, for me, I think especially, having suffered with depression, as I know probably people in this room have, success is happiness. I mean, I'm very ambitious. I love my work. I'm so grateful to do what I love. But, I've had all of that. I've been at the most successful point in my career and just been so incredibly unhappy. So, happiness along with, being able to do the things you like.
Yeah. So you've said what next? You're not going to be becoming Prime Minister, even though some in the room clearly would like that to happen.
I'm more of a diplomat, I think.
Oh, OK. Well, Cabinet Secretary? Super fast-track civil service, here we come. Now, what's next, and apart from the possible reunion?
Well, I mean, this book, it's been received so beautifully, and it was lovely to get it out there because, so much is written about myself and the Spice Girls. To be able to tell that story in your own words is great. And I've missed my music, though. I've done some shows this year. It's great to get back on stage. Obviously, we're all able to gather together like all these lovely people in this room tonight. But yeah, more music, more DJing, which is my new thing, and more of the same.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure joining you on the ladder. For those listening on Times Radio, I'm going to leave you now with Hannah McKinney. Thank you for tuning in. For everyone here in Cheltenham, you will get a chance to ask Mel C what you really, really want in just a moment. Right. I'm now going to take my earpiece out so I don't have Times Radio in my ear. So,
can we swear now?
Well, I assume so. Yeah. Let's hope our mics aren't live. Let's just do a little. Let's just check that we're not going out live on Times Radio. I'm sure the boss. So we can just relax now. I can ask you what I really wanted to ask you.
Yeah, come on. I'm taking my jacket off and everything.
But it is now your turn in the audience. I've got some great questions coming in on the iPad. I'll try and get through as many as possible. The top question, When You're Gone, is possibly my favourite duet ever. This is from Ross. Big fan of you both. Oh. Is there anything else you would really love to sing with? Anyone else? Sorry, anyone else? I misread the question. See, I'm relaxing too much now. Is there anyone else you would really love to sing with?
I've been so lucky, haven't I? So the collaboration with Brian was amazing. And Lisa Lefter-Lopez, I was lucky enough to work with. I love a duet. If anyone ever says, come and have a sing, I'm like, go on then. But I think now what's interesting, my last album was quite electronic because I started DJing about 3 years ago and it just reignited this passion for dance music. And I'd love to do some collabs with some DJs. I think that's kind of quite hip.
Name names?
Right now? Well, who's out there? Obviously, Calvin's the big one. Calvin Harris. Someone like Diplo would be really fun. There's a great Liverpool DJ called Mel C. So, and there's some great female DJs as well.
Great. Okay, so that was the top question. And there's also, I like this one. Hi Mel, how big is your trainers collection? Do you have any size 6.5? As I collect trainers, you're the best, Tracy.
Well, Tracy, I'm a 6. So if you can squeeze your feet in. Do you know what? It used to be ridiculous, but they all ended up going somewhere. I don't know what happened to them. Probably in my mum's loft. But yeah, it's kind of stacking up again because, like, the sports look's been back for a few years, hasn't it? And you know what I say? I say, Adidas, Nike, you're welcome.
What do you think of Liz Truss? Because I noticed you've got some very smart pointy shoes on.
Yes.
What are they? They look gorgeous. Are they?
These are. I love these. I've had these for years. These are Yves Saint Laurent.
Oh, I love them.
Why are
They're really. I've got a bit of a shoe thing. But Liz Truss had trainers on. Did you notice this week? Was that appropriate?
You know,
I like a trainer.
Should I give more of a shit about Liz Truss than I do?
You really didn't like that Liz Truss question, did you?
I think it's good that you can wear trainees. I mean, I'm all happy for the Prime Minister. I mean, to be fair, she's never going to look as bad as Boris did at times, is she?
Now we know what you really think. This is good. You're lining up. I love this one from David. And the reason I love it is because my kids now, well, one of them's older than yours, but the other's the same age. And they're always going about, 90s vintage and everything. And for me, it's like 90s, like yesterday. So David says, were the 90s just better?
They kind of were, weren't they?
Yeah.
It was so fun.
I mean, it's all a bit crap at the moment, isn't it?
On that level, we were booming in the 90s, weren't we? Like, there was, Cool Britannia and New Labour, and it was also optimistic, and it was an amazing time. What I kind of refer it to is like things I did in the 90s and then I've gone on to do in the noughties and beyond. It was like the Brit Awards. The Brit Awards in the 90s were the most fun because everybody was so badly behaved.
Yeah, like John Prescott got a bucket of water over his head, didn't he?
Jumbo One Bet chucked a nice bucket over his head.
Yeah.
Jarvis Cocker got up with Michael Jackson and did a dance. There was loads of stuff going on, but everybody's sober now, so they're really boring.
Yeah. So the 90s were definitely just better, David, in answer to that question. Joanne says, you were so wonderful on Blood Brothers. Do you have any plans to go back on stage again?
Well, I love musical theatre, just grew up going to lots of shows and, hoping to be in lots of shows. I've done Blood Brothers and Jesus Christ Superstar. It's really hard theatre, 8 shows a week. It's intense. I think if I found a role I thought I could do really well, then I would. But it's a really big commitment. But I would definitely consider it. I fancy Broadway.
Yeah.
That'd be a nice little bucket.
When you've done the Cabinet Secretary, yeah.
First things first.
And I love this one from Sharon. The oldest Melanie fan, she says, I'm aged 56. Wow.
I'm not far off that, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I was thinking, that's not old. I love this one. You've done thousands of interviews and been asked thousands of questions. What's the one question you want to be asked and haven't been? And what's your answer? Because I want to ask that question.
It's a good question. It might take me a while. I don't often get asked questions about like songwriting and things like that.
Yeah, because it's interesting in the book how I didn't realise how much input you had into all of those songs, all of you. So yeah, tell us what compose that question that you will then answer.
Yeah, well, I think I just have all these wonderful songwriters like in my mind that I've worked with, and the wonderful thing with the Spice Girls is we were very inexperienced. We loved music. None of us play any instruments to any level. I can play a few chords and a guitar, which they say is enough. Bollocks. You need to know loads, and it hurts your fingers. But with the Spice Girls and working with incredible musicians and songwriters and producers, we learnt the craft of songwriting. So we had all our energy and crazy ideas and experiences and influences, and they helped us form them. And then I think going off into my solo career, that was so amazing, because obviously coming out of the Spice Girls, which was such a huge success, I had my pick of all the greatest musicians, producers and writers of the time. So yeah, like a kid in a candy store, and having this opportunity to express myself as an individual and not part of a collective.
What was the question that you were going to answer? You talked about music. What is the question that you would like to be asked?
I haven't quite formulated the question. It's something about songwriting. I just wanted to wax lyrical about songwriting.
Okay, fair enough. I don't think that I think I asked quite a lot of questions. I'm quite happy that I didn't miss one. I thought you were going to say you should have asked blah and you would have got X as an answer.
No, I think what I found really fun about the book is there's so much more to ask.
Yeah.
Because often when you're promoting music, you get asked the same things.
Great. Okay. On your book, this is from Emerson. On your book, you mentioned playing at the Fleece in Bristol, experimenting sounds for your third album. Is playing smaller venues something you'd like to do again?
Yeah, I mean, I would play any venue, any size. I say this thing which I think makes me sound like a bit of a diva, but I don't really like arenas. I like theatres and stadiums.
Yeah.
Not really into the in-between ones.
So the Fleece in Bristol may well expect...
Yes, it may see me again.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I kind of asked something... actually, I'm going to come back to that one because I think that's the same... I think I've asked a couple of David's questions, and it was a very good question, David, but I'm going to come back to it. Georgie says, what's your favourite karaoke song? I love karaoke. Please tell me.
So karaoke, there's a great picture in the book of, and I think it's an unseen photograph, like it hasn't been published, of the Spice Girls in Japan singing karaoke. And that was our first experience. And me and Emma love a bit of karaoke, but it's always got to be a Spice Girl song.
Oh, I love
Your Life,
the
I think
Whitney
is my
Houston
number
one though.
Oh,
yeah, nice ballad.
Don't go easy, will you?
Or Diana Ross.
Flipping heck.
But I
Spice Girls are much easier to sing.
Right, this is a lovely one from Amy. My 6-year-old requests the Spice Girls on her Alexa getting ready in the mornings. What is your advice for the next generation of girl power?
I think it just magically permeated this generation. I mean, I go on my closest experience, which is my daughter. She's so headstrong. She's so sassy. She knows what she wants. And I know there are lots of, personalities within that generation, but I do feel like our young women are very inspirational, and it makes me feel very excited for the future. And I just want them to continue to to batter down those doors and
And what would you do if Scarlett said she wanted to become a singer like you?
I would laugh. No, I wouldn't. No, we've
I hope she's not listening to this.
No, she knows. We've had this conversation. I was so supported by my mum, and whatever Scarlett wants to do, within reason, I will support. But when she came to me and, just said, I would never want to do what you do, Mum, I was really relieved.
Yeah.
Because she's incredible. I know whatever she goes on to do, she's very creative. Whatever she goes on to do, she'll be brilliant. She's going to give the world hell, which is what we need. But she hasn't got that passion for performing.
Right, but what was it? Oh, right. So was it that put her off, that she's not sort of as extrovert a character, or was it seeing how hard it was at times for you?
I just don't think she has a love of it. I think her passions lie elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. And you've got to have a love of it to do it, really.
Yeah.
Fiona says, did you have any kind of process when it came to writing the book, and what was your favourite part of writing the book? And I'll just ally that actually with Rachel, because I want to try and get through as many questions. There's so many great questions. Rachel says, did you find the writing process cathartic, and what did you learn about yourself? So 2 of those. What was your favourite bit of it?
Okay.
Was there a process? Did you find it cathartic?
I really enjoyed all the fun bits, the kind of the real anecdotes, meeting heroes, icons, royalty, dignitaries. and, you know, those iconic Spice Girls moments, because I wanted to make the book very descriptive. I wanted people to really feel like they were there, but not those pictures everybody is so, you know, aware of, more like behind the scenes and what was going on in the wings. And that was really, really fun. And I think describing where I grew up and, you know, that whole experience. I was in America last week, and that was actually a really interesting part, because obviously growing up in between Liverpool and Manchester in New York and LA is very intriguing to them. So that was really fun. But the book, you know, I avoid writing an autobiography for a very long time because, you know, I'm not a fan of these young celebrities writing autobiographies. I don't like the milk it culture that often is within the celebrity world. And if I was ever going to tell my story, it had to be very real and true and honest. And I think chapter 14 is when I talk about the issues that I had, and it was my darkest and lowest point. And that was the final deciding factor in saying yes to the book, because I just feel like, you know, I've been lucky enough to have the courage to talk about my issues publicly, which I know is helpful to people. And I just wanted anybody out there who has suffered with any of these problems, is suffering, is concerned for anybody else, to just find comfort in those words, because I know how lonely and isolating it can be. And when I was in that time and I read things or heard people speak, I know what a comfort it was to me. So I kind of wanted the book to be all things entertaining, funny, insightful, but helpful at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because you described, when I said what was it that got you out of that, and, you know, was there anyone in particular, you did paint that picture of being very alone during that time. So that idea that by writing this book you can stop someone else feeling as lonely as you were at that point, that's the main motivation.
And I think everybody's experience of these issues, whether it's depression, an eating disorder, anxiety, agoraphobia, I mean, you know, the list is pretty endless, isn't it? What us humans have to kind of deal with. And you don't think you're the only one, because you know other people suffer that, but I think you feel you're the only one that has it that way, and that you're different and you're weird and there's something wrong with you. And you know, the experience is different for everyone, but it was important for me to be as descriptive as I could so people could go identify with things, you know?
I'm just going to whiz through a couple more questions. We've only got a couple more minutes. Someone said, which concert that you performed at has been your favourite and why? Thank you. Love from Don and Saz.
Ooh, so many great concerts. London 2012 is up there, but that was only 6 minutes, so it kind of counts. The stadium shows, I mean, obviously, sadly, Victoria wasn't there in body, but she was in there in spirit. But they were just incredible. It was a moment when we all fully realised the impact we had, not only on a generation of people, but like new fans that were discovering the Spice Girls, and it was magical, and we have to do it again.
Yeah. And yeah, a lot of questions about, are you going on tour again? I mean, if Victoria doesn't join you, would you go it?
Yeah, you know, the four of us have talked about continuing from 2019. The plan was to do it sooner, but there was this thing called COVID. Kind of got in the way. But yeah, we're trying to get things together.
We're probably the final question now, although I did just want to say this one's just from a fan, says, your book is incredible. It has personally helped me so much. But I want to end on this one from the wannabes. Your book title is Who I Am. At what age did you really understand who you are?
Oh, that's such a good question. You know, I was inspired in 2019. I did the stadium shows with the Spice Girls. I went on to do Pride shows all over the world with Sink the Pink, who are a drag collective. And those two experiences really helped me finally accept and understand every aspect of myself. So I would say it all happened in 2019. And how old was I in 2019? You do the math. I'm really rubbish at maths.
40-something.
40-something.
Let's just settle for that.
I'm 48 now. So.
Well, that was absolutely fascinating hearing all about your career. Thank you very much for all those lovely questions. Signed copies are available in Waterstones here of Who I Am, and it's been brilliant, Mel C, to find out who you are. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.